marked his 20th birthday a couple of weeks ago. When we march about our loved ones, we have a cause which is bring them back home now. And we didn't plan it, but I also wanted to quote a poet, if that's okay. A U.S. poet from New England by the name of Robert Frost, defining what home is. What is home as a concept? So Mr. Frost defined home as a place where you feel in control and properly oriented in space and time. And that is what we are asking for our loved ones. To be in a predictable and secure place at home. We, unfortunately, are running out of time. And I use this as a symbol to define the urgency of this matter. And we call on our president and all the parties involved to do whatever they can to bring our loved ones back home. I hope to believe that my fellow U.S. citizens remember the fact that there are 8 U.S. hostages. I remember as a child, I'm sure you also remember, in 1979, when there were U.S. hostages. There was a counter in front of the TV, and I asked my mom, what is that, what are they talking about? Why is that number moving each day? So I like to call from here to our fellow Americans that care about this topic. So we as the families, we have this patch, 152 days. I'd like to ask any fellow American that cares about this topic, being from New York City, Massachusetts, Montana, Nevada, wherever. If you feel about this topic, please put a patch on. Count the days if the media isn't doing it. Be with us. And I urge also the congressman here at the State of the Union could also put a patch on and say 153 days. We're waiting. We're waiting. And we're running out of time. Thank you.
Mr. Lawler from New York.
Thank you, Congressman Gottheimer, and I'd like to also bring up Congressman Swazi from New York, as well as the Nutra family, who have shown such courage, such stoicism in the face of severe adversity. Every parent can only imagine the horror that these parents have had to endure, these family members have had to endure for months, 152 days, hoping, praying for their loved ones to return home. And for all of us as members of Congress, we have spent a lot of time with these families, the families of the American hostages, as well as those families of all the Israeli hostages. And we have worked valiantly to try, with the administration, to bring their loved ones home, and we will not rest until they are brought home. And these families, at a moment of immense grief, have taken the time to come and meet with members of Congress on what is almost a daily basis. Because that's how important it is. And that's how much they care, not just about their own loved one, but all of the loved ones who are being held hostage. All of us have shown over the past many months our strong support for the State of Israel, and we will continue to be unwavering in our support for Israel and their right to defend themselves, and unwavering in our opposition to Hamas, and unwavering in our demands that the hostages be brought home safely. I want to thank Speaker Johnson for working with me, along with Congressman Swazi, to make sure that the Nutra family has tickets for tomorrow night's State of the Union, so that all three of them can attend as our guests. And this is truly bipartisan, and intentionally so. But this is bigger than politics. And these families should be heard. Their loved ones should be remembered. And we, as an American government, need to do everything we can to bring them home. And so, with that, I will invite, Tom wants to say a few words, and then Orna, or however you'd like to do it.
So let me just thank Congressman Lawler. The Nutras are residents of my district in Plainview, New York. And I could only get one ticket for the State of the Union, and Mike Lawler arranged to get the other two tickets. So we want to thank him so much for not only just getting tickets, but everything you do to support the State of Israel. And I can't add much to everything that's been said already, but I just want people to think about this is a family. Think about what families are going through. You've got a brother who's in college, who's worried about his brother. He had to get out of college and escort his family over to Israel and back and forth and different meetings and things like that. Every day he's got to worry about his brother. We've got parents. My wife, Helene, and I have a 20-year-old, a 25-year-old, and a 28-year-old. Omer is 22 years old. I can't imagine. And they can't get their hopes up, because when they get their hopes up, they have to worry about them getting dashed the next day. And they can't get down too low, because they have to keep on working to try and bring attention to people. So it's so important when Congressman Gottheimer and the rest of the members of Congress have pulled together here with the families to bring attention to the plight of these families and these hostages. It's so important that we keep this on the front burner so that the President will continue to do his work, that his team will continue to do their work, that we'll continue to make our pleas known to Israel and to our allies that we're trying to resolve this issue with. So we just have to keep on bringing attention to it. And this is, these are not politicians. These are not people who do meetings like this on a regular basis, but they've been so incredibly strong to keep on bringing this to the attention of the American people, of the American administration, to the Israeli people, and to the Israeli government. I visited with the Nutras in Tel Aviv back in December. Israel is so unified, but there's so much more that has to happen. So, Mike, thank you again. Congressman Gottheimer, thank you again. Orna, if you want to.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you to Speaker Johnson also for making this happen for us. I've come to speak today about my son Omer. He's a 20-year-old American, 22. Born in New York City and raised on Long Island, he deferred his studies at Binghamton University to defend his grandparents' homeland as a tank commander in the IDF. He's known for seeing the positive in life and in people. He should be preparing to attend university here in the US and not suffering in the Hamas underground tunnel terror maze. We count the days since you were stolen from us by Hamas, Omer. Today is day 152. And who would have believed that to this day, we have not succeeded in bringing you back? We've been running around all over the world, meeting with leaders, pleading with them to do whatever possible to bring you back home. And once again, we're here back in Washington. We're running out of words and running out of strength. At times, I wish I could just retire to a place where there's no media, just disappear until there's finally a breakthrough, until the phone call comes with the news of your release. Omer is in our hands, they will say. But I also understand that there is nowhere to escape this nightmare, and anywhere, there's no comparing our nightmare to Omer's nightmare. I can't even imagine. So we pull ourselves together again and again and again, and we travel to the ends of the earth, speak in Omer's name, for he has been silenced for now 152 days. And as the country gathers together on Thursday, we have a duty to Omer. Our attendants, the yellow ribbons that we pin to our lapels, and the dog tags that we wear on our necks will remind the world that until each hostage is returned home, our work is not over. Every office in the Capitol has received a packet with a dog tag and a yellow ribbon, and we implore members of Congress to wear one or both in order to call attention to the plight of the 8 American hostages, including our son and the remaining hostages. We're not asking members to take a political stance. This is a bipartisan issue. It's not about supporting one side or the other. It's about supporting the release of our son, Omer Nutra, an American citizen who has been held against his will for 5 months in the darkness of Hamas captivity without food, water, and we don't know even if enough oxygen. We don't know whether he's alive or whether he's dead. We're just keeping the hope. The stakes have never been higher than they are now. As the negotiations continue to drag out, we are demanding that the US, Israel, Egypt, Qatar push harder than ever for an agreement that brings all of the hostages home. Their release will simmer down the whole conflict. Please do everything to bring our son and all of the hostages home before it's too late.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz from Florida to join us.
And can I ask the moms, the Jewish mothers, to join me? Mothers. Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Thank you. I think you're a Jewish mother. Thank you for bringing us together. I asked the mothers to join me because as a Jewish mother of twin 24-year-olds and a 20-year-old, I've spent every day since waking up on the morning of October 7th with my colleagues in the Middle East, hearing about the alarms going off all over Israel, and then meeting and getting to know and becoming friends with these families, with these mothers, and never being able to shake it out of my head. They are but for the grace of God. I have internalized, as has our American Jewish community all across this country, where we all, I think, have felt the agony of the taking of these families, children, and Hamas's viciousness and evil. And so coming together today, thanks to our bipartisan colleagues, is so critical to focus on our American hostages. We went, as Don Norcross said, in January, back to the region to press for and prioritize the American hostages. We certainly can't rest while a terrorist group that has murdered Americans is continuing to hold Americans hostage. Nothing is more critical than what President Biden and his administration are doing right now, every day, fighting tirelessly to bring Americans home right now. Our message to these families, to our regional partners, the American people, remains consistent and clear. Hamas must not succeed. The hostages must come home. And as with the first 100 hostages, the way forward is to negotiate a temporary pause in fighting, coupled with the release of the hostages, with the Americans as our top priority. We're Americans. We've all been advocating vehemently for all the hostages to be released. But it is an abomination that there are 6 Americans and 2 deceased Americans who are being held captive. And I'm proud President Biden and Vice President Harris have stood by Israel's side throughout this whole time, defending the American and Israeli people and using every ounce of leverage to get a deal done. And there's a deal on the table, spearheaded by the President, backed by Israel, Egypt, and Qatar, that will get hostages home, aid to Gaza, and a pause in fighting. The ball is in Hamas's court here. We have to tell Hamas to accept this deal right now. Anyone who wants to see a temporary pause in order to get the hostages released and a just and lasting peace at some point down the road has to demand that of Hamas. It has been 152 days. These innocent families, our fellow Americans, must come home now. Those who have been lost must be brought home and laid to rest. And until that day, we will continue to stand together, arm in arm, with these families and help make sure that the Jewish mothers across this world, hearts restored, and everyone's is a little less alone. Thank you.
Debbie said there is nothing partisan about freeing the hostages at all. It's not a Democrat or Republican issue. Mr. Stewart, would you like the floor?
Thank you for having me here. I just came to announce one of my constituents, Jillian Kay, whose stepson, Sagi, whose father is here with us, is my guest for the State of the Union tomorrow. It's one of my constituents, one of the 6 remaining hostages that we hope and believe are still alive. And I had the opportunity to serve in the military, serve in the Middle East. I was actually the chief of detainee operations. And I think it's long past time. I call on the Biden administration to do what we need to do to send our special operation troops in to get our people out. When I served, we knew that when we got stuck or we got in a place or we went somewhere that America was going to be there to support us. America was going to be there to come and get us out if we were trapped or in danger or anything like that. And I'm calling on the administration to take whatever steps necessary it is to bring Americans home. 152 days is long past time and way too much days that have gone by where Americans are in foreign land in the hands of terrorists and our government's not going to get them. I stand with these families here today and sovereigns, and I stand with them. I think all of America needs to know that these families are still grieving and that we still have 6 Americans behind enemy lines in the hands of terrorists. Thank you for having me.
Ms. Wilson, Mark.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you to all of you for being here today. I want to first thank the families of the Israeli hostages for joining us here today. We see you, we hear you, and we stand with you as you wait to hear from your relatives and friends who are being held hostage. I am from Miami, and I represent a large Jewish community in Miami. Many are my neighbors. The stories that you all have shared and the stories I have heard from them are heart-wrenching. The suffering is immense, and the grief of not knowing, not seeing, not hearing from their loved ones is torture. Many of you will remember my hard-fought battle against the terrorist group Boko Haram and my many trips to Nigeria on behalf of the Nigerian school girls. Boko Haram was ruthless, and the stories I heard from the families of the then hostages were chilling. So I know firsthand how heartless terrorists can be, and see what Hamas has done in the region, and to hear the stories of Hamas holding even children hostage is heartbreaking. So, in the spirit of my 7-year journey declaring bring back our girls, to find the Nigerian schoolgirls who were kidnapped in Shabbat by the terrorist group Boko Haram, I am demanding the same kind of worldwide advocacy for the release of the Israeli hostages kidnapped by the terrorist group Hamas. And I say, bring back the hostages. The time to act is now. We cannot allow these families to endure endless suffering, living each day in the shadow of uncertainty, not knowing whether their loved ones are even alive, much less what conditions they are enduring. So today, I wear blue. to stand in solidarity with the families behind me today and to stand with Israel's quest to bring our hostages home. Josh, I ask you and all of the members of Congress that every Wednesday we will wear blue and we will take a picture and we will speak on the floor and we will demand and demand until every hostage is released. We did it for the Chibok girls. We wore red for 7 years. Those little girls, those that were released, will never be the same. So the longer they hold these hostages, the worse it will become every single day. So this is the act of now. Today, this must happen. So I join you. Debbie, all of you, join you. The person who went to Nigeria with me was Lois Frankel, my Jewish friend. She went with me to Nigeria about the girls. And now I am with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Brad Schneider.
I'm Brad Schneider. I represent the 10th District of Illinois. I'm joined by Abby Poland, whose nephew, Hirsch Goldberg Poland, is captive in Gaza. 8 Americans held captive, 6 alive, 2 were murdered. We need to bring them home now. For those who don't know, I'll just share some tradition. On Fridays, as the sun sets, Jewish families in Israel and around the world light the Sabbath candles to welcome in the Shabbat. We then sing, oftentimes a song, Shalom Aleichem, welcoming in the angels. And then they bless their children. And this is what happened on Friday, October 6th. And on Saturday, October 7th, Hamas, in a barbaric attack, invaded Israel, tortured, brutalized, murdered civilians, mutilated and burned dead bodies to torture and further affect those who survived. And they took more than 240 hostages, including Americans. 152 days later, we need to bring them home. Every one of these hostages are our children. And every day they are in captivity is a day too long. As families blessed their children on that Friday night and woke up the next day not knowing their fate, time has stood still. Every day the sun comes up, but it is still October 7th until these people come home. Every day, families are left not knowing the fate of their children, not knowing the location of their children, not knowing when they will see them again. We say a blessing every Friday. May the Lord bless thee and keep thee. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may the Lord lift his countenance on you and bring you and all of us peace. Peace will come when hostages are released. Bring them home now.
I just want to say, on behalf of my nephew Hirsch Goldberg Poland, and my brother John Poland, and sister-in-law Rachel Goldberg, who are not here, they're in Israel, attending some other family matters right now. Just really appreciative, Congressman Schneider, and for everybody here, Congressman Gather, everybody here, for everything you are doing. We appreciate it. It is 152 days. We're all working hard to do this. We have to work a little harder because they're still being held, but we know everyone's working with the goal of getting them out, bringing them home, and bringing them home now. Thank you.
Liz Naftali, who's the grand aunt of released American hostage Abigail Morgan.
Hi. So I am representing Abigail, who is 4 years old, who was released 102 days ago. I've been standing here with many of these Israelis who are Americans. And they are Americans because they raised their children here, they were born here. And I speak on behalf of the Americans and saying that it is our job and our obligation to bring home their loved ones. Having said that, Abigail is considered the lucky one. We're the lucky ones because Abigail was released 102 days ago. That was 152 days ago when she and her brother and sister witnessed the murder of their parents in their home. Her mother's an American, and they witnessed the murder of their mother, and then Abigail and father, and then Abigail was taken hostage for 50 days. But we are the lucky ones because Abigail came back after 50 days, and she came back after 50 days because of the leadership of President Biden and his administration, because of the work of the Qataris and the Egyptians, because of the work that so many in the region did, because of the bipartisan leadership that we have here in the Congress, but also because the Israelis and the Hamas leadership agreed to make this possible. 109 women and children were released that week, and here we are now 102 days later since Abigail was released. And what I can say is we know there is a deal. We know there is a plan for what is a ceasefire, a pause in fighting. We know that that will bring back hostages. It will stop the fighting. It will give people the opportunity to get humanitarian aid safely to the people who are living in Gaza. And we don't really know the details. We are in the dark on what the actual details are and where it is stopped. And metaphorically, these people's loved ones are in tunnels somewhere in the dark and they don't know what is going on. But what I can say is that this is our opportunity to come together once again and be united in releasing hostages. And if that means that we need to put more pressure on the United States government, keep putting more pressure on the United States government. These leaders can handle it. If that means putting more pressure on the Qataris, put more pressure on the Qataris. If that means put more pressure on the Israelis, put more pressure on the Israelis. We all need to come together. But what it also means is it's time for us to put pressure on Hamas, the American people, the Palestinians, people that want to see a ceasefire and want to see a break in the fighting, a stopping in the killing, bringing home Americans, bringing home all of the hostages. It will only happen if all of these sides are united again with the leadership of America, with Qatar, with the Egyptians, with everyone. But it takes all of us to come together and really call out and put the pressure on everybody that is in a position right now to make a decision. They have been there 152 days too long. It is time to bring them home. And I am here to say that Abigail is home with her family. She does not have her parents, but she has a future. She has an opportunity to grow up in a beautiful world. And we want all of our children to grow up in that world. And so I ask everyone here today and everyone standing behind me, in the spirit of 4-year-olds, in the spirit of children, that we make this possible and that we get a ceasefire, whatever we can, to make sure that our hostages come home, people in the region are safe, people are not being killed, and that children have a future. Thank you.
Thanks. Kathy Manning. Representative Kathy Manning. Good to go. Mr. Sherman.
I'll be brief. I'm Brad Sherman from California. For 28 years, I've served on the Foreign Affairs Committee longer than any Democrat. I'm pleased to be here with the Alexander and the Nutra and the Penn and Naftali families. This is a war crime. To take hundreds of people hostage for no reason other than they could. This is a war crime to fail to allow Red Cross inspections or even to provide a list of who is alive and who is dead. This is after 1,200 people were brutally murdered. And yet, we hear the cries from those who shout, "Ceasefire now." I join with them. We should have this deal that's on the table. The hostages should be released, and we should see a 6-week temporary pause. Because there are more than 134 hostages. There are 2.5 million hostages being held by Hamas. Palestinians living under terrible conditions, some not getting the food that they need. All of them could be benefited from a 6-week ceasefire. And Israel says yes, and Hamas says no. And we need ultimately a permanent ceasefire. That will require Hamas to leave the region. We saw that in 1982 when the PLO went from Beirut to Tunis. It is time for Hamas to release the Israeli hostages. It is time for Hamas to release the Palestinian hostages, the millions who are suffering right now because they won't enter a deal that Qatar and Egypt think should be entered into. There is a lot of blame, a lot of blood on the hands of Hamas. Thank you.
That's okay. I'm Congresswoman Kathy Manning. I represent North Carolina's 6th Congressional District. And as you all know, one of the hostages, Keith Siegel, is in North Carolina. I'm standing here with some of the most courageous people I know because they are the family members of people who are being held hostage. And they are able to get themselves out of bed every day, which I find astonishing. But they do this because they come to make sure that the world doesn't forget about their children. And I have met with these people so often that I feel like they are my family members. I think about the hostages every single day. I talk about the hostages every opportunity I have. And I have one question for the American people. Where is the outrage? Where is the outrage that 6 Americans are being held hostage by vicious Hamas terrorists? We see protests on college campuses. We see protests at our congressional offices. But they are not protests against Hamas. They are not protests calling for the release of the American hostages. And so I ask, where is the outrage? When will we stand up and ask as a country for the release of the hostages? And not just the American hostages, but all more than 100 hostages, including women and babies, who we know were brutalized and are continuing to be brutalized. We in Congress are speaking out every day. We are working with the administration. We are working with interested foreign governments, but it is not enough. We Americans need to speak out against Hamas. This entire conflict could be ended if Hamas would release all the hostages and surrender. We would see the conflict end, and these suffering families would get their loved ones back. I will continue to speak out. All my colleagues will continue to speak out until we can gather with these courageous people and celebrate the return of their family members, the return of all of the hostages, and the beginning of the end of this conflict. Thank you.
Bring us together and close from New York, a great champion of these issues, Dan Goldman. And I also want to thank FKDK for working with the families and all of them.
Thank you, Congressman Gottheimer, for organizing this. Thank you to all of the families for being here, for continuing to speak out, for having your the determination that you do. 5 months ago, on a Saturday morning, I was awoken by air raid sirens with my 9-year-old and 5-year-old daughters on either side of me. We were in Tel Aviv. My wife was with my 6-year-old son, and we had shuttled back and forth to the internal stairwell of the hotel, which served as the bomb shelter. 5 months later, my children are still suffering from some degree of trauma that they experienced. And that is, of course, nothing compared to these families, children, and loved ones who have been in horrific captivity for 5 months. Since when does the United States not care about a terrorist organization holding American citizens hostage? Since when is our focus not on getting those hostages out to the exclusion of anything else? It's baffling. And of course, there are many, many other innocent hostages who remain in captivity. And we now have a definitive report from the United Nations that not only did Hamas use horrific sexual violence on October 7th as a weapon of war, but that they are continuing to do it to the hostages in their control. Why are we not all irate and speaking out? Right now, Israel has agreed to the broad terms of a temporary ceasefire that would occur before Ramadan, last for the entirety of Ramadan, release some hostages, release a disproportionate number of Hamas terrorist prisoners in Israel, and importantly, allow for an essential surge of humanitarian aid into Gaza. The United States and the Biden administration worked diligently and hard to broker this deal with Qatar and Egypt. Hamas has to this point refused to accept the deal. That is unacceptable. Qatar and Egypt need to use their leverage to pressure Hamas to accept this deal. And I call on the Biden administration and the United States government to exert our own pressure on Qatar and Egypt in order to pressure Hamas to accept this deal so that we can have a temporary pause in the fighting, so that humanitarian aid can get in, and all importantly, so that the hostages can get out. 5 months, it is far too long, and it is unacceptable that we are still here waiting for Hamas, a terrorist group, to give us a basic list of who they have, to even, after preventing anyone from getting in, to check on people that we know dozens have died in their captivity. This is absolutely unacceptable, and we need everyone in this country and around the world to start applying more pressure on Hamas to bring a pause to the violence for the benefit of the Palestinian civilians and the Israeli civilians, including 6 American hostages. Thank you.
Again, thank you so much for being here today. I want to thank especially the families for your strength, and we'll stand together and sit together tomorrow night and stay together. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.